Welcome. And with us today, we have Kelly from Pennsylvania. Kelly, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, I don't even remember how we got in touch. I probably saw you on Instagram and liked the comment that you had or something and reached out to you. So, go ahead and I have no idea about your homeschooling journey. Go ahead and let us all in on it.
Yeah, so that's such an open-ended question. uh, this is our sixth year of homeschooling, which is crazy to even say. I can remember when we first started, and people would say 6 years in, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're geniuses, and now it's like, oh, we are far from that. And so we kind of got introduced to the idea. We were out west on a trip, and we saw this school, and I think this was when we just had our daughter, and so she wasn't even old enough to start. But we had heard about a school out west that was all outdoors, and it was like, oh, it's kind of a cool concept, but we're in Pennsylvania, and so it feels a little harsh,
It's
during winter.
cold for a lot of the year. Yeah.
Planted a seed, and we were like, all right, we have years to think about it. And then my daughter went to public school for kindergarten, and I honestly didn't even know until I signed her up that it wasn't a half day program. Like I just assumed, that's
Yes.
how we were all raised, and it
Yes.
felt do. And then it's like, oh my gosh, she goes 8 to 4, I think it was, or 8 to 3:30 till she got off the bus. And I was just completely overwhelmed. And she would be trying to go to school. And then, she didn't, when her teacher was great, it wasn't like we had a problem, but it just felt, didn't feel right. Like I was an attorney prior to having kids, and then we started our own company and all these things. And so I was home, and I'm sending her, and she's crying, and I'm sad. It's like this just doesn't feel right. So we brought her home in first grade, and I didn't really know any other homeschoolers at the time, to be honest. I knew some out west that like were in our company, but we didn't really know them. And so I was just, and my cousin does in California, but we don't talk that much about it. And I kind of thought she was crazy, to be honest. She has 6 kids, and I was like, I could never. And then here we were. And I was like, I feel like I can handle first grade. So I went on and researched. We did The Good and the Beautiful that year, but I didn't even, I was so new to the idea of it that it wasn't even like I was taking her age into account. It wasn't like, oh, she's 6 and I should do this. It was like I got the math curriculum, and there were this many lessons. And so I planned them out over the days, and I like apologize to her still. I'm like, it was so intense for a 6 year old because I didn't know any better. I didn't have community here at that time, and I didn't have anyone to bounce ideas off. And just even the books we were reading, like I look back now, even at my 8 year old and what he's doing, and I'm like, why? I'm sorry. Like maybe you don't remember that year, But now, after that, we joined a classical conversations near us, and that's been really, really good for us. Community wise, it's a lot of the people we go to church with, and we've actually opened 2 more campuses here in our little small town. So, yeah, we've done that for the past 5 years.
Oh, that's awesome. So you have the two kids?
I have three. So
Three.
my oldest daughter is 12. She just turned 12, and then I have a 10-year-old boy and an 8-year-old boy.
Okay. And so, yeah, you just jumped in full fledged because it didn't feel right. Like sending this tiny little 5-year-old away all day, which I agree with you 100%. Kindergarten was a half day when I went to school. And it just seems
Yes.
like now there's not only full day kindergarten, but there's also full day preschool. Like my son was actually weird because he was part of a 3 and 4 year old preschool that met 3 times a week for 2.5 hours, and he was the 4 year old in it. So he was of the older group, and all the 3 year olds actually start out there, then go to a full day for 4 year old at the regular public school. They call it like universal daycare, universal preschool, or something like that. But
Yes.
so it like swooped our kids up for a full day in kindergarten, and then now it's swooping them up for the full day in preschool
In
too.
preschool. So true. Because and looking back, it's like these are your most prized possession. You should have been researching it. But even my oldest, poor thing, when I sent her to preschool, it was because like it was August. And I started seeing, I hadn't even thought of it at that age at 3. And I saw all these people like, oh, so and so's getting ready for preschool. And I'm like, oh, like maybe I should be, it's like this weird peer pressure thing until you actually dig in, like, I can do this and this is fine. But it was like, I should be sending her. So I did. And it was the same idea. Like once they got to be 4, 4.5, it was like, you need to be prepping them. This was not the standard, but the idea from the teachers, like you need to prep them for kindergarten. So we have these 3-day programs that are half, but there's also enrichment, and that should be 5 days. And then you can keep them in the afternoon if you want to get them used to sitting. And it's like, even that was like, I never did that. I was like, that kindergarten will come in its own time. And that's when I still thought it was half day. And it was like, they don't need to prep. They don't, kindergarten was like, I thought it was like when I went, like tying shoes and, story times and all that. But we were shocked when it was, I mean, like I said, we loved your teacher. It wasn't a bad experience. It just was not at all what we were expecting.
And you would think that getting a hold of our kids sooner and for a longer period of time, we would have these geniuses that emerge as 18 or 22-year-olds, and they're just like splitting the atom, curing cancer right and left. And yet, kids statistically are less intelligent or know less information when they graduate, whether it's high school or college, than they did years ago.
Right.
So
It's so
what are they
true.
doing with them all day long?
Right. It's exactly true. It's exactly true because you realize that when you bring them home and you can get done in this little amount of time what you need to get done, and then they have all this time to play. It's like, what are they doing? But the sheer quantity of children in the classroom, not only are they not getting done what they need to, they're not getting any one-on-one time with the teachers. They're not getting, you know, morals and values and what we want to teach them from home aside. They're not even getting one-on-one academic attention very much, and so
Right.
that was like, okay, we're sending them away for what? It was kind of like started as like, why are we sending them? And then, it's come now to like, at what cost are we sending them? Like, why? Not just like, why would we send them? It's like, this is, you're like, I can remember when I was growing up, even back, I was born in 81, and I was raised Christian, and I can remember my dad like sitting us down even at that time and kind of what happened in school, and like what is truth, and how should we have handled this biblically, and what should we do, and just, I thought, I was so annoyed about it at the time, but I'm like, he was kind of ahead of his time in that aspect, because it's like, that is the most important thing that we want to be teaching them. And that, not only are they not being taught that, it's completely going the other way now. And so I joke about that. We have different moms nights for our co-op, and I joke about that, like, not really, but like, my kids might be dumb, but they'll know the Lord, and so it's like,
Yeah.
what are you giving up by sending them away that much of the day? And then, if they're in sports or anything else, you're just not having that time at
You
all.
never see them. Right. And I do think that there's a design behind that. Like, scurry them out of the door and make sure that you're so busy with sports and different things in the evenings and on the weekends that you don't have
Yeah.
that time to sit there and talk about your family values, or even evaluate what is your kid learning? Like, where do they need extra help? Where don't they? Where are they falling behind? Where are they insecure? Where are they maybe feeling less than, that you should, you know, be doing something about? It's I think it's by design. I mean, it's too coincidental that it all just happened to work out that way.
Right.
You can look into the Rockefellers and why they got their hand in the education system and what they wanted as a workforce, for
Right.
their
And
endeavors.
I agree. And I think they intentionally create this gap between parents and children, that not only do parents have no idea what's going on in their child's educational life, social life, any of it, but we've gone the full other way, that parents feel ill equipped to even discuss these things with their children, because we don't know what they're talking about. We don't know what they're learning. We don't know what they're going through. It's like, they're just completely separate. And
Yeah,
like
and
you
I
said,
was at a play recently that my friend's daughter was in, and the play, I think it was on Broadway, something about Percy Jackson. I should have researched that ahead of time, but the whole play is about our parents are so dumb. Our parents don't understand. The
wow,
parents, don't see the big picture. The parents are evil. And I'm sitting there going, oh my word.
right?
And this is something the kids are actually putting on. And it's not the only place I've seen that message either. And you think
Right.
going to the theater is going to be like, you know, something good for you.
Right.
So I want to go back to a couple things that you had said. Now, you do classical conversations. I haven't really had anyone on that delve delved into what that is. Can you explain that for us?
Sure. So, by nature, that, and just to share a little bit of the backstory, it's really funny. I had known someone who did classical conversations out west, but I wasn't really friends with them, like I said, and I only knew. So, kind of how it works is there's three different stages of learning, and so it kind of is ideally catering to how children learn at that stage. So they spend their first up till sixth grade. Really, it's kind of like they liken it to computer like data entry. So you're getting all the facts, you're putting all the pegs in, and you're repeating that in cycles by every 3 years. So there's three different cycles. So they're doing that up until sixth grade. When they start fourth grade, they start to add in like essentials of the English language and like writing, a lot of writing and that kind of thing. And then it's kind of like, if you're sticking with the computer analogy, you're putting all this data in for all these years. And so they know that, so that when they go then to kind of start to make those connections, they already are aware of the facts behind all the history and all of the, so that there's US history, ancient history, and medieval history are the three different cycles. So they learn those for all those years, and then they start to kind of put the start to kind of put the links together and how that works. And then so the end goal is then, analytical thinking around all of that, kind of the concept of learning how to think instead of what to think. And so it's really in the older years a lot of just asking really good questions, and it's student-led discussions and debates and really wrestling heavy topics and apologetics, a lot of that stuff, and mock trial and different things like that. And so my oldest will start, we call it challenge years. They're seventh grade year next year, where she really, they start early digging in on some of these topics that you can only see things from your own perspective. And I remember I was an attorney before all of this. And when I was in law school, I was an intern for our PA attorney general in the criminal division. And so they did death penalty things. And I remember the first day they pulled us in, and it was like, what's your stance on the death penalty? Like, we deal with that here, and I just remember this heavy, like, from my value standpoint, but also like when you're actually faced with making that choice and fighting for that, and all the just everything, all the weight that came behind it. But our high schoolers are dealing with that and debating that out on both sides. And I remember saying to these directors, like, how can they even process that at this age? I could barely process it as a late 20s, but it's because they've wrestled, they've learned all the history, they've read all the books, they're doing all the prep work, so that when they come in debate, they have both sides of it. They can think critically on either side and fight both sides. And so it's less emotional for them because they are able to think through that kind of stuff, which is really neat to see um, down that road. But it's been it's been neat to kind of we have a full campus, so we get to see all the way up through our seniors. And I remember the first day I went, like, if you can guarantee my kids will turn out like this, I take my money, like we're ready to go. Because I just had never experienced that, not only my own experience, but with other children, public school, that were able to really just communicate and articulate and think through things at the level that these children were thinking through things, and able to question in a way that was non-offensive, like speak on truth and know the truth and what they believe is truth, and be okay arguing that without it turning into a fist fight, and it was like, this is amazing that they can be guided up in this way. And I was just really attracted to that model.
Yeah, most adults can't do that. So
Right.
now,
That's
what
what I'm
does
telling my kids. Master your emotions around how you speak and be articulate and know why. You are ahead of 90% of adults in America.
yes. Now, what does like a week in the life look like for you guys? Because it sounds like the classical conversations is more, it doesn't really touch on the math or like science stuff. So when you go to this campus, what do they teach there? How many times a week? Is it parent led? You pay teachers?
Sure. So we go once a week. Ours meets on Tuesdays, and they will teach all the things. It doesn't currently include math. You do your own math curriculum. Starting next year, they've developed a math curriculum. My understanding is that it's going to go the same kind of route, like learning a lot of math facts and then moving into how to analyze them together and onto proofs and things like that. But that's yet to be seen. But so we go Tuesdays. They teach. It's just by week, so it's 24 weeks. So that the tutors. I actually direct sixth grade and under. So I hire mom tutors or dad tutors that come in, and they have classes of 8, and they teach through like the history, the geography, math facts, different things that it's like memory work that they'll learn for that year. So that's sixth grade and under. And then we learn that for that week, and then you add in your own math and language arts up until they're in fourth grade. Now the older ones, they are prepping like a week in advance. So I think they read like, even in seventh grade, like 25 books a year. And so they're doing a lot more on the front end because they're obviously held to a higher standard of going in and communicating what they've learned and that kind of thing. At the younger years, it's a lot of memory in the younger ages. But
So you just meet the once a week. So you kind of have that work to do on your own through your own homeschooling at home, but it's
right,
it's the curriculum
yep,
that, they'll be going there and talking it out with a parent slash teacher and their classmates. That's kind of cool.
right,
Is that an
yeah.
organization that has stuff set up throughout the US, or is that something you guys started, you personally?
No, it's actually worldwide. It's
Yeah.
in a bunch of different countries, and there's a lot of campuses in the United States. But they have a whole curriculum that they developed, and they have a ton of resources and stuff online. And so it's kind of like a well-oiled machine. We go in, and
Yeah.
what I've loved about it is I desperately, that's the one tip I tell moms now, and they say, I think I'm going to make this plunge, what's your number one thing? It's like, find a community around you, because that first year it's all I was looking for, but I could only find like 3 and 4 year old moms groups or different things like that. And for me, having someone, they always say, if you're going to go through a minefield, follow someone who's been through it. Like, for me, having those moms that are 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps ahead has just been it's taken such a burden off my shoulders. Like, I don't have to worry about that yet. Cause you always get the question. Like, I remember when I told my mom we were going to start homeschooling, she's like, well, how are you going to teach them trigonometry? like, that's the most random question. I said, I'm not. I'm going to teach them addition this year, and then I'm going to move into subtraction, and then I'm going to move into multiplication. And by the time we get there, we'll all be learning it together anyhow. So it's this neat array of students, but also this neat array of moms who have run the gamut. So there's so many big families in there, and some of them have graduated kids, and some of them are just starting. And it's just this beautiful mesh of like, okay, like, she was a mess too when she was at our stage, but like, look at the beautiful, like, the persistence and the consistency and just keeping showing up and trusting the process that if this is where the Lord led us, then He will provide here. And like, just seeing the moms that have stayed faithful and done that, and seeing the fruit of that labor has really been, it's just a beautiful thing to be able to guide moms. Like, if you are worried at all, go to these moms. They'll sit down and just share their journey, and it's just it's been really encouraging in that aspect too.
Yeah, and that's why I started the podcast too. It was like I was interviewing, quote unquote interviewing, asking people so many questions when the year that my son was in the preschool, and thinking, can I really do this, like, for kindergarten and beyond? And it was like, well, like, what even exists out there? It's like this whole world that nobody really talks about unless you're in it. And so I
Right.
was, asking this mom with, 9 kids that's been homeschooling the whole time, and this family that isn't really religious at all, but they're homeschooling, and, oh well, what are your reasons? And it's like everybody just had such good information to contribute that it was like, well, why don't I just ask everybody that I can find and put it in a podcast? 'Cause,
Right.
it's, and it really is, I've seen so many different ways for homeschooling to be done, and I still don't know the best way to do it for my kids. But it's like, that's going to change, because
So true.
you'll you'll never know all the curriculum that exists. You'll never know the best way to do anything. You'll never know if public school or private school or homeschool was better. The only thing you know is that you love your kid and you're making the best decision for them at the time with the information that you have, right? And
Right.
a girlfriend said this to me the other day. She was like, if you were a billionaire, your kids wouldn't be going to public school. They've got other elaborate schools set up for that, if they even go to a school, or they have tutors come in.
Yeah.
So not everybody gets this experience of public school that we think that we're robbing our kids of, when we
Right.
are debating, do we keep them home to homeschool or not? And even when you think of other countries, like, I'm so ignorant because I have a public school education. I don't want to throw out like Somalia,
Right.
but they're not in Somalia.
Right.
I'm willing to bet they're not having like the Friday Night Lights football game experience and the proms, and because really that's what we look back and think of when we think of
Yes.
our high school experience. And was it really that
Right.
great? Probably not. It was the looking forward to it. I think that really gets
Right.
us. But you can still have those types of experiences, all different ways when you homeschool, whether it's with
You're
a
so right.
homeschooling community or not,
Yep.
or with the school. You can be a prom date. You can still go to the
Right.
football game. It's not like they make you have a school ID to go to the game. So yeah, you
Right.
just have to let go of
Do
that fear.
right. And the things you like psych yourself out about. So we were in kindergarten, we were and it's funny how you get those confirmations as you go. Like when she was leaving kindergarten, it was like, well, what if she doesn't have Valentine's parties? It's like
Yeah.
in the whole scheme of like why we're bringing her home. That was so naive. Like, who cares? We made boxes here and we all like had fun with it and made it's like you make up for those areas, but and even the like go-to questions that everyone asks, like, what about socialization, or what about this? Like, I can remember when we went to the co-op for the first time, and um I had heard a lot of talk about like cross age interactions, and the whole thing about in public school how they're only really around their age anyhow. And I thought, this is interesting. I was looking forward to seeing that, but just even in that day, and it's just expanded since then, but your own expectations that you kind of project on your kids. Like, my boys were like, can we go play basketball? And it was all these like 15-year-old kids. And I'm like, I mean, you can ask, but like, if they say no, just accept no. Well, I mean, they joined right in and they played with them. And, my mom heart's like, okay. And then my daughter, she was sitting with just kids from 2 up to probably 14 or 15. And because I like never research and like, I research everything, but like the little stuff, like whether to pack a lunch on an open house day, things like that. I'm too busy down these other rabbit holes to see that, oh, we forgot lunch and I didn't pack. Well, these girls like circled up and put their lunches in the middle and all shared with my daughter. And I'm like sobbing at the table, like, this is exactly what I want for my children, and it just, when you get these confirmations and it makes sense, and the reasons you start homeschooling, or the reasons that you might psych yourself out, like you said, oh, that maybe they're going to miss X, you name it, prom or whatever. You can recreate those, and you can find those. I mean, there's so many. I always, when I hear homeschoolers that did it back when like we were kids, I'm like, I mean, like, about like props to you, because they didn't have all the resources. Now it's
Yeah.
like, if you don't feel like you can teach a class, you can get them in a class online, or get them in a
Yeah.
class wherever. It's like there's so many options. You just can build your own. You can build your own life with it. You can build your own schooling, which I love about that now.
Yes. And that's kind of why I wanted the podcast too, was like, okay, let's web all these things together. Like, you could do this route, you could do that route,
Right.
you can choose from these curriculums, or you can just unschool, and you're okay either way. But it is so hard to navigate, because I can understand it being just so overwhelming. Like, well, there is so much. It was almost easier when, well, you had the good and the beautiful, or, I don't know. I forget the other
Right.
one. What they had back in like the early 2000s.
Right.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about. You said that you were a lawyer, and for me, this has been one of the bigger obstacles, is actually leaving my job. And I know you said that you left prior to deciding to homeschool, but how did that process go? Like, do you work at all now, or like, how did it feel knowing that you invested this much time and money into an education and a career, to then that you were just going to go leave? How did you go through that
Right.
process?
Right. So when I graduated, I was single and not married when I went to law school. So I had these big like I'm going to work in corporate field and I don't care about long hours. Like I had no perspective on that at all. And so I almost went into the Air Force to be an officer. Like that was kind of where my brain was like, why not? You know, you can come out with all these benefits. Well, then I met my husband at the time, and you know, everything changes. I wanted babies right away and kids, and so I worked for a little bit as an attorney, and then kind of simultaneously we were looking into different businesses to start. We had tried an electrical company, and then the business we're with now, the keto business, kind of simultaneously took off during that time. So um, he ended up leaving his job. Well, I think I left my job first and started working from home from a company that I had worked for prior to law school. I took 2 years off and was just I didn't realize how competitive it was to get legal jobs, and so I'm reaching out to all these firms and not hearing back, not realizing like I had no law school experience even. But I ended up getting a job with like an underwriting company for homeowners insurance, and so I went back there and I was able to work from home. And then we had the baby and I was able to stay home with her, and it was like, oh, like once you get that glimpse into like being home with your kid, it's like I can never go back. Like I don't ever want to leave her. I want to teach her everything. I want to be here for all the moments. And so I did do some work like drafting wills and estates and things from home, contracts. But as they got older, you know, it's just not as feasible as when they're napping all those times a day. And so it was kind of like, you know, we were either going to go all in with the other things. And my husband at the time started his own electrical business. So we had a lot going on, but it still is daunting. I mean, my law school loans aren't paid off, but it's kind of like, you know, I do have faith that God will provide, and I have faith that, you know, He's working all things out, and that I feel so sure in this decision to stay home and homeschool them that it's kind of just giving that daily, like, okay, that's there, but so are all these other opportunities, you know, and we have the opportunity to stay home for these what are like fleeting this 18 year, you know, even in 12 years, it feels fleeting, and it's like, how is she in sixth grade already? How are they this big? And so, you know, when I look at that and how fast it's going, it's like I can go back if I want to when they graduate. I can do that. But for now, you know, God is providing these opportunities to stay home. Like I'm also, so we have that business. And then I don't know if you've heard of Barton. I can't think of her first name, but it's a reading program for children with dyslexia. So I was
Yeah.
able to start house doing that, and directing the co-op, of course. And so it's like, you know, there's not been necessarily a time where it was like, oh no, I don't have any income. It's just like these opportunities when you're just surrendered and open to like, where is this path going to lead us? You know, if you would have told me when Hayden was born that I would be doing all of this, I'd say you're crazy. But it's like you know, the more you learn, the more people you talk to, the more you're solidified in why you're doing it. You make a way, you know, really. And so it's like, could that stress me out? Sure. But it's not all the other I mean, it's more stressful, like you said, to me to send them to public school and have someone else raising my children than any of those other stressors are at all.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think a lot of it has to do, and I've talked about this before, is society making us think like you were saying, oh, I don't care how many hours I work in a day. I can do the long hours. I can do all this. I can be in the Air Force. And I was the same way, even though I went into government work, which wasn't quite as ambitious, but they dangle the pension over you and you're like, okay, well, when I get to be 55, I'm going to have this much money. And okay, well, maybe if I go part-time, for my maternity leave for 6 months. Well, maybe I'll have to be 56 when I get my pension now, but I can still get that good pension. And it's like, think about what you're thinking about right there. What are you going to do at 56? Like your kids are gone. Yes, you can do a lot at 56, but what can you do with your children at 56?
Right.
And
Right.
and I had I believe it was Rosemary Larrabee on my podcast, and she said women, moms can have it all. They just can't have it all at the same time. And yes,
Right.
maybe that means you're not going to get that full pension, but if you have faith or ambition, something else will be provided for you. You're the one that determines how much money you get. And then God forbid you don't don't live that long or whatnot, something else happens, you're here in the now, or that, the dollar collapses and we don't even have pensions. I mean, it's not like that hasn't happened before where, oh, the pension money is gone. Sorry. So I think we're just so programmed to think that we have to be busy all the time and we have to be this career driven, force. And we really have to take a step back and think about why that is. And then when I learned
Yeah.
about like the women's movement of the 60s, that really kind of got me like, what? Now I'm angry that I felt like I had to go this way because like was our government behind the women's movement? Let's get a bigger tax base instead of 50% of
Right.
the, income that we could be getting in taxes.
Yeah.
Let's double that and send the moms in, and then we'll take tax money and start their kids in school even younger. Like, I mean, there
Right.
are daycares that depending on your income are paid for by, our tax dollars. So, they're taking the kids at 6 weeks old in some cases, and it just blows your mind. Like when you
Right.
really start thinking about it, you're like, this is why they're trying to keep us so busy so we don't come to these conclusions.
Right. So you don't start to put all the pieces together and like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Right. It's so true. It's so true. And it's
Yeah.
almost like makes you sick to your stomach when you look back and you see the pattern of it and what happened and like a whole how many generations now that were away from their parents it's like but they like I look at my parents and I think like I wonder if they ever like I don't think they did, but if they ever it ever crossed their mind that like there was something like you're talking about like
An
that
agenda.
that this is how it's planned, yeah, an agenda, and that the government is doing this on purpose. And my mom worked she passed away in 2020. She was only 69. She had a heart attack. And
Ugh.
she worked up till the day that I started having kids in 2011. And so, 9 years, but she worked and worked and worked and worked. And then finally stopped working when I had grandkids. But it's like, it's almost like that's what you're waiting for because you don't have time. You're programmed to think you can't take that time off for your own kids. And so then you're just like, okay, well, I'll just wait till I have grandkids. But that's assuming that your kids come back and that you're that you're close to them and they even have your same values at that point because you haven't been around them for 18 years. And so, like you said, it's just this separation of family, separation of homes, taxation. It's like all the things. And I love now that there's so many more people that are opening their eyes to it because even now when you talk about it you're like I might sound crazy but like it's true, like look at what happened, look at the patterns, look like do your own research, it's there, I didn't make this stuff up on my own. And so
Yeah.
it's nice now to get around like-minded people and they can put two and two together and you can have these conversations and go in depth about it. But to anyone else it's like, oh, that's not true, and you're like, your heart is like your babies need you.
Yes. And for my son, who's now 5, I mean, I did keep my job with the government and he went into daycare and he did that. I think maybe started out at 3 days a week in daycare. And then I was like, oh, this money's nice. Let's bump it up to 4 days a week in daycare. And I was dropping him off at 7 a.m. and picking him up at 5 p.m. And it's like now that I never have left my daughter's side other than right now because I'm recording this podcast. But she's she's in my in-laws, she's with family. But like
Yeah.
I I'm mad at myself, but also I'm like not many parents have this perspective because usually you're either the stay-at-home mom for all the kids or you're the working parent for all the kids. And the things that I've seen that I missed with my son, and I do feel a disconnect with him sometimes that I don't even know that I would know that there's a disconnect, but I see how connected I am with my daughter, and I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I gave up on breastfeeding with him after 3 weeks, and it was just like 6 months in, okay, go to daycare, and I don't know. I'm just and the learning how to walk. Like I probably missed his first steps. That was probably at daycare, and
Right.
it's like just all these little moments. Like my daughter just running up to me and giving me the biggest hug. Now she's a year and a half, and it's like, oh, that's such a nice feeling. I'm so lucky. I get to feel that hug about 50 times a day. and like what
Right.
that does for you. And yes, there are really hard times in the day. Like I'm a very anxious person and my son will stress me out because he's so high energy and he's just running around the house like a little like I don't know, a little ball off the walls and stuff. But like I don't know, I love that I'm there for all of it. And no matter how hard or how stressful it is, or even if I yell at him, I do have to forgive myself later and like say, all right, you know what? Yeah, he was yelled at. At least he was yelled at by his mom. I love
Sure.
him. He wasn't yelled at by some lady that got, is waiting for her tenure and, is
Right.
only there because she has to pay off her loans, you know?
Right. I
Yeah.
can't
So
imagine
it's,
with
I
that
feel like I
here.
missed out on so much. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so true because I think that too. I think we all have that mom guilt. It's like I know people, people ask a lot now like how do you homeschool? I'm thinking about this and like what is every day like? And I think they expect you to say like all days are perfect and there's no yelling and everyone gets all their school done and we always finish math curriculum and whatever it is, but it's not. The truth of the matter is it's hard because you are the teacher and you are the mom and you are the nurturer and you are all the things, but there is yelling but I love that all those opportunities to help them through those emotions are coming from us as the mom. Like okay, there's opportunity for me to apologize and ask for forgiveness. There's opportunity for them to get angry and then like, okay, what do we do with that anger? And so it's like you're always this, learning not just academically, but you're always there as like you said, I'm the one that loves them the most. I have their interest. I have their most interest at heart. And so, not all days are good. In fact, a lot of days there's craziness going on. I'm like you, I'm like I get overstimulated easily and it's like everybody sit down. But like you said, at the end of the day, I think you have to just really I love that you said, you take in those moments, like not taking for granted that she comes and runs and hugs you and not taking for granted that, they want to, my middle son, I always joke about him. It's like every math problem, there's got to be a story in between. And sometimes I'm like, okay, we have to get to this answer. But like, I sat back the other day, like, I'm thankful that I'm the one he's sitting here telling these stories to, and we won't forget this. And, it's like making sure that you're aware in those moments and staying in gratitude through all of it. But you wouldn't want them to experience that with anyone else, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's so true. And I have to tell myself that too when he tries to interrupt. Because in my mind, I'm like, he's interrupting because he just wants to like divert the attention away from the work that we're trying to
Yep.
do. So I'm getting like
Yep.
angry inside. But yeah, there out of those moments do come beautiful things half the time.
Yeah.
So maybe
Right.
allow them and steer them back in when you have to. And it was, yeah, just to prove that it is chaos and nobody really knows what they're doing. I mean, my son today, I asked him with his phonics work, I said, okay, the two sound or the sound that we have is ig. I need you to give me a word that rhymes with ig. And his word was frig. I was like, oh man. All right. Well, I said, this is
Yeah.
a good opportunity to tell you that that's not really a nice word. And that's not a word that we say
Right.
around. And it's a word maybe mommy shouldn't say. But, but they're all good learning opportunities. So true.
It's so
So,
true. And I love like, when you hear your kids having those conversations. You don't necessarily, like for me, if we're around people that are doing life with us, these conversations that they hear us talk about all the time about you name it, the gamut of what we talked about today. But when they get around other people that aren't along the same line of thinking or that maybe do go to public school or maybe you name it, whatever it is, and hearing them kind of try to like parse out these ideas and unpack it, it's like, it's almost like little kid apologetic. Like they're trying to like, they don't have the full skill set yet because they're young, but I'm like, oh, this is cool. And you want to hop in, but you're also like, oh, I wonder how they're going to like defend that idea. Cause like they haven't had to, it's like, I agree with them or we're like, right, we do believe this, but also this, it's always a safe place, not where they're like, well, that's dumb, and they're like, my mom says it's not dumb, and you're like, okay,
yeah.
okay, I get it. No, but it's like, I love those conversations too, because it's just always opportunities for growth for them.
Well, and yeah, it leads me to remember when I was saying previously how in public school today, your child could go in and say, I believe in God, and they would get like made fun of or probably hush hush from the teacher. We keep those thoughts to ourselves. But they could go in and say, I believe I'm a cat. And they would be like applauded and the cool kid, you know? Maybe that is a stretch, but I don't know. I have nieces and nephews in public school. And whether they're just
I
getting
don't,
me riled up or what, they say that that is
right.
happening.
Yes, even we live in a super small town, and I think it's easy to believe that this stuff happens in the big cities, but our I mean, I think I graduated with 100. That is tiny, and those things are happening here. The litter boxes in the rooms, and the even the books in the libraries. I mean,
Yes. Yes.
and
The
they're
books.
defending us. It's like it's brought to their attention, and so someone came to me and said, "Hey, this book on your bookshelf has this." You'd be like, "Oh my gosh, no, I didn't." Let's evaluate that together. But even being confronted with it, they're defending it. They're
Hmm.
defending it, which
Hmm.
is so wild, and if you come up against it, then parents here are faced with this. They don't necessarily know that they want to homeschool, but they know that they've gone to the school, they've expressed their concerns, and it's falling on deaf ears. And so it's like, what are the other like they just it's just come so full circle from when I was growing up, and probably you, that you public
Yeah, I'm
school is
about
just
the
the
same
thing.
age.
Oh
I was born in
yeah,
84. So, yeah.
school, nobody homeschooled. That was like the weird kids. And I
Yes.
remember my out in Vegas, and doesn't have kids, and he's like, I was worried your kids were going to be these quiet, weird. And you're like, that is not even what homeschooling is anymore. Like, we have, even in this little town, we've got a huge community of homeschoolers, and like you said, they're all over. Some are faith-based, some are not, some are half in school, but it's like people just realizing, like, we don't have to live like and there
Yeah.
are other options, and there is support, and like, just start somewhere, and figure it out.
Yeah, and when I realized that the schools were doing just like with the masking and now with the books that are pushing agendas in the library, they're getting funding for that. Like so that affects the money that they're getting. So if
Right.
all the parents that disagreed with that, and listen, you don't have to be like, "Oh, we're," you don't have to disagree with like what adults are with what adults, but we can all disagree that it's not age appropriate. I mean, whatever you believe for adults to do behind closed doors or whatnot, we can all agree this is not age appropriate for what they're trying to push, at just the
Right.
basis there. So if all the parents that disagreed with that took their kids out, they would lose so much funding from us, because I would imagine that you need a certain amount of enrollment in order to keep
Right.
collecting the tax dollars. I mean, I know that's what we pay here. Our most of it, it's not even property. It's school taxes. It's like a good 8,000 a
Right.
year where I am, and I'm like, oh my god, it's 2 miles away, and I'm
Yeah.
not sending them.
I know, and we don't use all of it. I know. It's so true.
But it's
It's so true.
dangling that carrot, just like with the pension. They dangle that carrot. Hey, we got free daycare,
Yep.
and you
I
can't.
heard though that enrollment here has gone down, which I was surprised, because you think in your head, like, even if they're getting funding, like, even if someone offered me funding to teach my children that, you wouldn't accept that at any cost. You wouldn't even take $1 billion to, like, teach your children these things, because it doesn't make sense. And you think that that's the mindset of people. Like, they have their values, and they have, even if they don't match mine, if they have certain things that they stand on, that you just wouldn't be persuaded on. But it's just not the truth. But I heard just the other day that our school is down in numbers, and I'm like, oh, come on, moms, keep it going. Like,
Yeah.
get them out. But I'm anxious. I would be excited, anxious to see how that does affect funding, and how what they do if those numbers keep going down, and how that shifts. But
Yeah, and
there's obviously
I'm
the
willing to
way
bet
too.
that the people that are signing up for them aren't reading the actual books, okay? Because they've had
Right.
parents at the hearings or committee hearings reading some of the stuff in this book, which is very sexually
Yeah.
graphic, and they make the parents stop reading because it's not appropriate to even be read in that atmosphere. So I guarantee they
Right.
aren't actually reading it. They bring it out as in, well, hey, Billy has two moms, and we want all the kids to treat him as if, uh, normally, we don't want him bullied for that fact. And okay, I think everybody can get on board. Yeah, we don't want Billy bullied. So
Right.
they're bringing it out as if that were the agenda behind it, but it goes much further when you actually look at the literature, if you can call it literature,
Right.
which is pretty crazy. Now, go into what you do on Instagram. I've seen like stuff you have kind of an influence there. What are you working on, and how can people find you if they wanted to reach out?
Yeah, so my Instagram name is Couch, my last name Couchkn. And it's been kind of a journey for me on Instagram. I started it just when we started our keto business. It was like, okay, let's cast this net as big as possible and see. But then we really just grew in person. Like that's my heart, is to get to know people just at a deeper level and hear stories. Like I'm like you, I love to hear people's stories and kind of how it got them to where they are and their thinking and all of that. And so we just grew that in person so much more because the connection was there. But then when I realized, like, I started to see other people on there, like, okay, they are making these deep connections. They're just very intentional about who they are interacting with on there, because you can go on there and just feel so flooded with all of it. Like
Hmm.
we don't watch the news. We do World Watch. It's like 10 minutes biblical view in the morning. We get our tidbits, and then if we want to research more about whatever, we can. But so when I would used to go on there, it's like, is this really something I want to bring into my life? Like, it feels XYZ. But then it kind of was like, okay, but I can change that. I can go on and I can provide the content that I would want to see. And I can, just all the things you go through. I think I was so naive until probably, really, I hate to say it, but like 2017, I can remember looking back and thinking, like, man, like we are really okay in life. Like we had three kids and we hadn't had any really significant trauma, and just things were good. I remember having that moment. And then in 2017, we just had a series of things happen that really just rocked our world. And I think it gives you so much empathy towards other people and compassion. Like, my gosh, I was probably so unsympathetic to people just because I hadn't experienced what they had experienced. And so going, like, kind of trying to shift out my Instagram to like really being vulnerable about what I'm going through and what we do and the mess of it all and the emotions behind it all, but like also the positivity and the healing and the community. And just, I've really been in a process of like shifting out who I follow and who follows me. And it has just been this really uplifting experience, because when you intentionally seek out those people and you're putting good in and you're putting good out, and like you're engaging with the people that are doing that too, it's really become just a neat, like, people just reach out and they're so open. Like, it's become exactly what I wanted it to. It feels like it's this in-person connection, but online, which is kind of hard to achieve, and I'm really thankful for it. Um, I don't think of it as having an influence necessarily, but I think that it's really become this beautiful way of like, you're someone else is one step ahead of me in an area, and I'm one step ahead of someone else in an area, and it's just kind of this sharing, like, that you can be on level 0 here and level 3 here and level 10 here, and at any level you have so much to learn and you have so much to give. And so that's kind of been how I run my Instagram, and it's really been a neat shift in that area too.
Yeah, I give you credit because it's hard, and I feel like, and I tried to take like a little course on how to set up, but I still don't know the difference between how to make a reel and a post and a story, and why you do this one or why you do that one, and like I make one, and then I'm like, oh, that was did not come out. I had somebody on fi- um like a freelance app, and I was like, okay, yeah, can you just help me with this? And they literally told me, you just need to stop posting because you're not good at it.
It's good.
I was like,
Like,
oh, okay.
go back to my first post, I'm like, they were so awful, but like I just kept doing so many that it like filtered the worse and worse and worse
Yeah.
ones down, so no one would see them. Like, as I learned something, it was like, oh man, those were really bad. Okay, just like keep doing more until you get better. Maybe I'll do that as my thank you to you. We can do another, like, I'll teach you Instagram. All
Yeah.
the things I did
Oh.
wrong the last like 5 years.
Well, and it's funny because the course, like I paid for this course, right? And it was like good information, but I'm like, I need it in the niche though. That's like, I have a podcast and I just want to like put things
Yeah.
about the podcast on there. And like, I'll say funny things in my head every now and then. But the way that it comes out on it, that doesn't necessarily look all pretty and whatnot. So I'm like,
Right.
I need like a little like Instagram like tutor with me at all times to like, oh, this is how we can
Right.
do that. Or like even
Yeah.
just little snippets from the show. I try to pull one or two, but when you got kids here all the time, and because my kids are little, 1.5 and 5.5, so it's like I really don't. I need to just like wake up at 3 in the morning, come out, do it, and go back to bed. But the little one still
Yep.
sleeps with me, so she's like, Mom, you're not here. Let me scream."
Yep. So did we for our co-op we started as directors of the different campuses recording videos for our tutors that just streamline the process. My friend that came up with the idea, I'm like, this is genius, we need to do it, but how, like you said, when do you record that you're showered and looking even decent for this
Right.
video to be a couple decades for people to use, and also like that it's quiet and you can get these songs right. And so I pride myself on just being as vulnerable and messy as it comes. And like, I didn't used to be that way because, you're on social media and you're like, oh, it should look this way or be this way, but just really in my life. And I love that, like, the feedback from that is like, it makes it so relatable. Like,
Yeah.
even in the co-op, like, some days I'm like, just why did they choose me? But like, here we are 4 years in, and it's like that vulnerability is just like through these videos, my hair's half up and it's sweaty, and somebody walks in and you're like, I am sorry, but like the information is here. Just the delivery might be a little bit off, but it's fine, and I started doing that on my Instagram too. I was having a conversation with a friend just about the little snippets, like you said, that you learn over the years, and you realize like so many people are looking for a way to whatever, you name it, be more positive in their day or even to start homeschooling, to make that jump. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go on like 3 minutes a day and share these little things that like I use every day. They're tools in my tool belt. Like, I'm mad at the kids. Here's what I do. I this. We have to get the dates. You name it, that like I didn't know 5 years ago. And if I would have heard a mom on here, like, or your podcast or the moms on here, like, oh, that's genius. I've loved, like, when we knew we were going to do this, I started to listen to your podcast, and I just love the moms on there. I just love how they're all from all different walks of life. And every single mom is so different in how she does it, but it's like we're all learning as we go and have so much value to give to each other and to anyone thinking about it. And so I just love that you're doing this. I love the stories that are coming out of it.
Yeah. I wish I have to take the time to go back and re-listen to all of them too, because I was trying to take notes for everyone, and then even that got away from me because of all these things I want to remember. But I also keep thinking of if I could just take like, every month get a group of the moms that, or even dads. I've had a couple guys on,
Mm-hmm.
and have like a little like Q&A or back and forth
Yeah.
with each other. It would be cool because everybody's had such good, like, I don't know where they all come from. Like, it's like a divine intervention. God was just like, hey, I'm going to put these people in front of you. They all have something to offer. And now we're on like episode 50 something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot them all.
Yeah.
I've got to go back and listen. Um,
Reunion, a reunion podcast where
yeah,
everybody comes on.
yes. And
Yeah.
yeah, and someone can tell me how I can make money doing it. So I'm like, okay, it's
Yeah.
about that time I have
Right.
to leave the government job, guys.
Right.
Here's my t-shirt.
Right. Right. Yes.
Um,
That's
is there
right.
any last words or thoughts, things that you thought maybe you'd want to talk about, that we didn't get to yet?
I just nothing particular. Just like just want to encourage whatever step people are to take the next step. Like, I talk to so many moms, even moms who have been homeschooling as long as I have, and even myself. You're like, can I? Okay, I have a bad day, and I'm in my head like at night, like, can I do seventh grade? Like, if I can't even do this, how am I going to get here? And you get in your own head. But it's even like people who are just wanting to start homeschooling, or they just want to, you name it, like, do it and you will find a way. Or like I just believe if you're called to do it, then the way will make itself. And it's just like you said with the podcast, like, people just show up, like, if it's divine intervention or whatever it is. But I found that the whole journey, like, anything that I was scared about or worried about, the minute that it was like came to fruition and it would have been a challenge, the solution was also there presenting itself equally as strong. And so I just want to encourage other moms, like, whatever is on your heart to do, it is so worth it. like we're going to look back and we're going to cry about it all and think of all the things we probably did wrong, but in the process you did so many things right. And so I think just celebrating that and just being encouraged to like take the first step and go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And I think, like, think about it in terms of on your deathbed. Are you going to look back and
Right.
say, oh man, I wish I never homeschooled them? Or are you going to look
Right.
back and say, I'm so glad I took that leap and did it? And you can always send them back to school. Like if they really hate it or it's really not working
Right.
out, you can't make ends meet financially, you can always send them back. There's like a help wanted sign everywhere. So I was trying to tell myself that today too. Like, you can always get another job. You can always work.
Right.
You're pretty competent. I've heard of places that are like, we will hire you as long as you have a pulse. So, it's how much how
Right.
much are you really going to regret by just giving it a try? And yeah, and you don't even have to think, can I do seventh grade? If you're in the kindergarten or first grade area, just think, all right, can I do kindergarten? That's really all you have to think
Right.
about, and then take
Right.
each year as that comes. Kelly, thank you so
And
much
reaching
for,
out,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and reaching out to moms who are doing it. Like, I think that's so important to get. That's why I love this podcast. Like, it's important to get that perspective because you can totally psych yourself out and not do any decision. But I have never talked to a single homeschool mom. Like, maybe they're course adjusting, or maybe they're sending one to public school and one to private school and half doing one and half doing the other. But you're not going to talk to a mom that regrets trying to do what's best for her child and like taking that leap. So like reaching out, all moms are willing to talk about it and to encourage you and to take that time out. And so I think that's great too.
So true. Kelly, thank you so much for being on today. Was there
Yeah.
anything about your keto business you want to talk about? Were you talking about like the way to eat keto?
No, so our keto business actually, so obviously now, everyone's heard about the keto diet and that way of eating. In 2016, we helped launch a company that actually has drinkable ketones. And so the same, you do the diet to get into ketosis. Now you can actually drink those ketones and you're in that same state in under an hour. And so since then, we've helped tens of thousands of people start to do, you can research it, ketosis
Hmm.
for whatever goals you have, whatever things you have. And if the diet helps with that, the drink does the same exact thing. It's bioidentical. So
And what is your business
then
called?
the company is called Prove It. And my actual site is mama, MOMMA couch.shopketo.com. So you can check that out there. Yeah.
Babe, you starting to lift again now that it's the new year? I'm like, yes, I am. I just don't know what day we're starting yet. So,
That's
but
right. It's like, but so we say people used to, swim to Cuba. Now they fly. This is the easy button to ketosis.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
So
it's
that's
so
good.
important though to
Yep.
keep you because you got to be a role model to your kids too, even health wise
Right.
and eating
Yep.
right, working out, all that stuff. Kelly, thank you so much for being on today. I love the conversation. I think it'll be a lot of fun for people to listen to.
Right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, bye bye.
All right.
Um,
Bye.